vuelve un poquitito básicos. No me muestres pínados, que tengo limitada la atención. Tengo ilusión de morir, amando donde estoy.
I mean, this is early morning for me. You know that
Me too, babes. Me too. I'm a child of the night.
And for you, how are you, Luis?
I'm doing good.
I know that you're doing good. I'm so happy.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I've been yesterday I divorced, so that's why.
You got divorced yesterday.
Yesterday I divorced. No, but yes. I was 3 months in Crete.
Okay, fabulous.
So I'm against relationships through theory, as a queer theorist. Because you know, there's this debate between the radical gays and the assimilationist gays. And I'm very much into that in Latin America, and it's harsh activism because it's going against the rainbow flag and all that. And I've been saying no relationship, no relationship, no relationship. So I'm in a crisis. That's why I'm like. What about you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just keeping myself busy, getting everything ready for the ICA in December. So I'm just like focused on that.
Yeah. Well, the ICA. So Luis, let's start because we know each other for a decade probably.
Yeah, we've known each other for a while now.
For a while, and so to me, Luis is like more part of the of my acquaintances, like the people I had around. Luis, it has been doing this forever. So Luis is not the person that you saw change and adapt to a way of being, because he embodies that queer theory. So, or at least an approach to queer theory. Why am I saying this, Luis? Tell us, who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Lewis G. Burton. I'm a performance artist, a DJ, an activist, and a curator. I'm based in London. I founded Inferno, which is this queer art rave, which is like also like a visual art and performance art platform for young queer people. I do a lot of activism work within the trans community, and I work closely with London Trans Pride. Yeah, that's kind of like my spiel.
Yes, but yeah. And every time you have a platform, you use it for conveying a message, and the message is a political message. Yeah. What's your political message?
I think for me it comes from a place of like my own journey, my own struggles with my queerness growing up, and the own journey I've been on with my kind of own trans identity and kind of how that's all come about. So I guess like, you know, for me, when I first moved to London 11 years ago, like I came from Newcastle, which is like in the northeast of England. Like I'm from a very working class area. I'm like born and raised on a council estate. And yeah, so moving to London, I had all this shame. I knew that like I knew I was queer, but I was like, I had no idea how to express that. So a lot of my early work was like dealing with my identity and navigating through my shame. And I guess it became therapy for me before I really knew what the word therapy was. It allowed me to process a lot of the traumas and shame and guilt I had in my life about who I was. And then from there, it's kind of evolved into a place where, great, I'm happy, I'm confident, I've like unpacked all of that work. I've got tools now to navigate through this. And I guess I'm in a new era where as a result, I guess, of my trans activism in the community around there, that it's really inspiring the direction of like my artistic practice and even like the direction I'm taking Inferno. So yeah, that's kind of the journey with that. So like as a result of all of that as well, I've been on HRT for a year now and taking estrogen to not to transition to be a woman, but to just alter my body in a way that is more androgynous. But like through this process of being on HRT, I found out I'm intersex. I'm like biologically neither male or female anyways. So
That's fantastic. I mean, hold on, but let's stop there because I mean, I this is something new for me.
yeah,
Not because of you, but because of like, I mean, my generation is used to identities, and actually in Spain during the 17th century, they were fascinated by hermaphroditism, and they were valued
yeah,
that's knowledgeable. So, I mean, in your case, um, you're cultivating physically your non-definition.
yeah. What like 1000%. But I did this before, like as a realizing of like getting older and being like, I do not imagine myself being like an old man per se, and like I want to embrace the femininity I had so much shame around growing up. And so I started estrogen as a way to kind of like align myself and make myself kind of like neutral and like be more androgynous. But then through that process, I've realized that I'm intersex, which is like the true like, you know, intersex is just the modern word, because I guess the word hermaphrodite is kind of used as a bit of an insult and it's not
Yeah.
like PC anymore. So like the word intersex is like the umbrella term for all of those different variations out of the binary sex gender of male and female.
That's another thing of when I discuss with there was I was discussing with Maria Belén Correa. Maria Belén Correa is very she lives in Germany, but she's the creator of the archive of transsexual history. But when both of you strike me as very interested in words, in the power of words, no, in a way as gays, we know the power of words, and we know the power of the insult. No? That we were grown, we grow with that thing, you know, like whatever, a faggot, whatever. And what's the importance of words for you, your work, and your activism? Of how do you call something on, or how can you change something? And what are the limitations of words?
Hmm. I think, you know, as you said, like most of my work is informed from the insults that were hurled at me and the things that made me feel bad about myself or shameful. So it's about like taking those words and like reappropriating them in the same way that I guess kind of queer's been reappropriated. You know, 50 years ago it was an insult. Even my grandfather growing up would say, "Oh, look at those queers on the telly," it's like it was a bad thing. So I love this like reappropriation of like those words and reclaiming those words. Like for me, like, you know, being able to like be like, I'm a tranny, but I also used to be a faggot. Like these are reclaiming these words for me, which I think is really powerful and important. Yeah.
But don't you think that also words can, because for example, you came back into my radar as a cultural agent. Let's call it like that, a cultural actor, because uh, a public intellectual like me in Argentina, that were both very corrosive, um, she mentioned you as a quote, and in the way that you mentioned like Kierkegaard, or you mentioned like Hegel. So and she said Leonor Silvestre. She said that I invited her and she didn't answer my email because she's annoyed with me because I didn't agree with everything she said. But anyway, we were going to with her, including her, because she's very intelligent. She knows what she's doing. But she quoted you in one of our chats, like if you were Hegel. So that's why I'm saying, like, are you aware of of the way you use your words and how the impact that those words can have in your actual political activism?
For me, I never really think of the obviously there's like goals within the activism of what we want to achieve and what we want to change, but like I'm just living my life authentically and being me and saying the things that matter to me and are important to me and expressing those things. I'm not doing it consciously to be like, I'm making a statement about X, Y, or Z. I'm just doing the things that feel right to me. And, I get messages from my friends who are like lecturers, for example, and they're like, oh, I just like put you in my thingy and all the little queer kids in the room, all their faces lit up. And I'm just like, I get nice messages like that, but like, I don't really engage with that, like who's engaging with me and doing what. I just keep doing what I'm doing because for me, I don't need validation from an external source or to be recognized in a certain way. I'm just going to keep on doing the things that I believe is like important. Yeah.
But you are validated by external sources and by big external sources and by legendary external sources like the ICA. So that this could be good and bad. So are you aware of what this means in terms of because you're bringing something to the artistic institution that the artistic institution is really lacking. But I think I don't want to give my opinion. What's your take on this? I mean, it's something that really transforms you into a figure, a performance artist that transforms DJing or party organizing into a form of art.
Yeah.
When does it matter?
Does it matter
anymore? I mean, because
of course it matters. Like nightclubs and nightlife, especially queer nightlife, is like the foundation of like most culture. And like, we are appropriated, we are used. The dance floors are radical spaces where politics emerges from, friendship, love, community emerge from these spaces. Like, and it's amazing that like I think an institution like the ICA is recognizing the importance of nightlife, especially in the UK where the government or local councils aren't appreciating nightlife and they're closing clubs and these spaces which are inherently like community centers for the queer community, right? These are our churches where we meet our friends, our family, our chosen family, and yeah, where we commune. But I think these spaces are radical, they're sacred, they're so important. And
yeah, it's correct.
no, it's just like of course there is like some validation to be like for the ICA to be like, yeah, like appreciate the work that we're doing, but I would do this work regardless and have been for the past 11 years, 12 years now, regardless of the big institution getting on board and recognizing us, because I see so much potential and so much creativity and culture and joy within my own immediate community that I like to cultivate and platform and support and nurture.
Actually, I was referring to that because I think that the art institution as such, I mean, it has a very tricky place in mostly after the 90s, since the 90s. Since the 90s, the return of the aura of the author, Damien Hirst, Tracy Emin, this kind of Duchampian conceptualism that ends up being self-justifying and transfer all the responsibility of interpretation to the viewer. And there's been an emptying of the art sense since the 70s. I mean, the 70s was the last, probably the last generation, and the 80s was the generation of the underground culture. So in Argentina, also here. So in a way, it's kind of like the embrace of the institutions. It's trying to bring back something that they themselves had expelled. And the risk of this is to turn lifestyles and damage and trauma, because it's difficult to be gay and to be intersex. I don't want to quantify difficulties, but it is more difficult because it's more visual. You know, it's the difference between being a Jew and being a black person. You know, so the Jew, if you want to hide it, you can hide it. The Spanish of the Inquisition, but if you're a black person, you can't. So, so I mean, this is a question about like the institutions and how institutions can help and how they cannot help, because has to do about inclusion. And you know, I'm convener of the queer co-convener of the queer work group in the International Federation of Theatre Research. We're having our next conference in Ghana, in Accra, and where they were thinking of passing, or ideas of passing draconian laws against homosexuals, against people who might look like homosexual. And Phoebe, I say hello to Phoebe. She's with me. She's a fan of yours, and in that commission, and the main concern were people like you, like what you did, because in Latin America we're used to deal with dictatorship by hiding as a virtue. You know what I mean? It's like, for example, or talking in allegories, talking in a way that the third one cannot understand us. But for a person like you, that freedom means a different thing, because you really need your visual. It's like your identity. It's evident. So this it establishes a problem when we're talking about identity, no? Because your identity is fixed in a certain look. It can exist, but it's fixed in a certain look. So these embracing institutions of that in a way are funded by capitalism, and the disco as a place of the dance floor, as a place of emancipation, it's a big debate. No, it's José Esteban Munoz wrote that amazing book, Cruising Utopia, where he questions the idea of that homosexuality and future are not compatible because we don't have children. I'm on the side of the ones he criticizes, but he brings voguing, and he brings that particular moment as a moment of emancipation, like the dance floor as a moment of emancipation. And the way you used it now, it sounds very much like what Munoz was saying. It's like the dance floor is the place where it's like what Madonna said. You know, it's a place of expression, a place of freedom. But actually, do you really think materially it's like that?
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah, without a question of a doubt. It's one of the very few last remaining spaces of resistance, I think, you know, and then it's the last few spaces of counterculture and where subcultures thrive. But even then, because of capitalism, because of, you know, austerity, these spaces are closing down and we're losing freedoms essentially, you know.
But why? You mean they're closing down because of gentrification?
Yeah.
Because this is what Munoz says. But I could say, okay, but to access the dance floor, you need money to produce yourself in a particular way. You need money to take the bus to the dance floor. As to the protest, you know, it takes money, and we're living. I mean, many people from Argentina and Brazil are going to watch this. The conditions are very different in England, because in England, if you protest, it's like there's something wrong with you. You know, it's so normalized. England is so domesticated that the belief of their own freedom is so big that they cannot even understand protesting against capitalism. So that I have to give a little of context, because if not, from from an Argentine perspective, it's like, I mean, you're like a posh kid dancing in a dance floor. But I mean, it's a valid criticism, don't you think? This idea that that finding emancipation in a place where the access is priced.
No, of course, but we live in this prison of capitalism, and like I can't go and overthrow capitalism. I'm only one person. This has got to be a wider society thing, what we've got to work towards, right? And all I can do is carry on fighting the good fight against capitalism, be vocal against it. But I need to survive. I need to pay my rent. I need to, eat. I need shelter. Like I need those things. We all need to survive under capitalism. Otherwise,
Well,
like
yes, but there's also the issue of fashion, because you walk in a very thin line between fashion and dance and nightlife, and when we're talking about activism, do you recognize the and how do you navigate that? I know that you have to pay the rent, but how do you navigate that difficulties without falling into victimization, between white kid victimization? Because at the end of the day, you're a white British person, so I mean you bear a very strong passport, so
there's privilege there.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, from the round perspective, you are the hegemonic figure, and I'm the subaltern. So, and this is the point where we start negotiating subalternity or victimizations, and it gets ugly. So, so how do you navigate these contradictions that might appear in the analysis of your activism?
Yeah, I think, working with London Trans Pride, for example, as an organization, we are very intersectional. We have people from, Latin America to the Cayman Islands to across Europe. And yeah, we are all meet at different intersections of, like obviously transness or being intersex, and how that crosses, or being non-binary, and how that intersects with like race and class, disability, so like we are so aware of that. And, I've been working with London Trans Pride for 5 years now. I haven't got paid a single penny. I do it as a labor of love and for a labor of change. And it means that we're not asking for money really from the community, apart from the bare minimum to cover like, getting staging and sound systems and stuff. But like that obviously comes at an expense to me and my mental well-being, because I'm working 1 day a week or a couple of days a week, or organizing a huge protest, like one of the biggest protests that happens in London regularly. And like as a trans person, I am marginalized in my own right. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to sit down and listen to other people's lived experiences. I'm going to, not only am I going to listen, but I'm going to platform them and give them space to speak and talk about their own experiences, so it can resonate with all other people. And I think it's about seeing what we have in common and looking at the things that we intersect on. And if we don't meet on any of those, but just sitting down and listening to another person and being like, how do these things affect your life? And what can I do as a person that maybe comes from privilege to help you, and yeah, vice versa,
And how can you help?
I mean, I'm already helping by organizing a huge protest and raising visibility for trans folk. Like with Inferno, I'm, now that we're in this new era of Inferno, where I guess it's combined with my trans activism work, that I'm booking a lot more. Most of my lineups are now made up of transgender, intersex, or non-binary artists or DJs,
Right.
and then we also meet intersections of from people all over the world, and different race and class and disability. So I'm very conscious of my programming when I'm putting on events and producing events, and making sure it's not like, I don't want to. There's something beautiful in bringing everybody together, right? And sharing the things we have in common, rather than being like, well, you're different, because look where it's gotten us. We're in the shit right now because of it. So for me, it's about community. It's about bringing people together, and it's about celebrating everybody and allowing people to take up space and be visible.
Yeah, I agree. I would say two things. I mean, one word that you mentioned a lot, I find it very interesting, is disability. What can you say about that? I mean, you're bringing the issue of queerness, and you're bringing the issue of disability. I am working with dyslexic artists, and I'm finding the most. I mean, it's actually it's the first time I'm talking about art in England when I'm talking with them. So the rest talk about money. So they are creative, they are visual. So what's your relationship with or your view on this relationship between this alliance probably between disability and queer?
I mean, there's queer disabled people like everywhere, you know what I mean? And that can be in a you know, that can be physically, or that could be because they're neurodiverse or something like that. So I'm just consciously aware of like including everybody in that conversation, because if we exclude them, then
Yeah,
everybody needs to
because
sit at the table, right? We
I
need to
have the
make
impression that they are still excluded,
yeah,
and we are in fashion.
yeah,
By saying this, I'm saying there's something that concerns me about this activism, this visual activism, is I'm quoting this marvelous book by Emily Fallon. She wrote a book called Unmarked,
mm,
and she says something very interesting. She said identity politics, it's problematic if it's based on the issue of visibility. This was the way feminism has dealt with for the last 30 years. It's kind of like if you make something visible, you emancipate it.
mm,
Well, Emily Fallon says, well, actually, you're not, because the rates of aggression against homosexuals, the rates of femicides hasn't decreased.
mm,
So actually, you're making visible something that, as you say, the government is not actually protecting, because
yeah,
there's a difference between rhetoric, speech, and there's another is the attitude. I saw the police walking in Pride, and there's another thing, which is the treatment of British police to gay refugees.
mm. Well, police should never have a place of pride, anyways, because the reason why Stonewall happened and we have the gay rights movement that we have today is because it was an act of rebellion against the police that were raiding the local Stonewall bar and harassing all the queer people and especially trans people, and you know, abusing them and beating them, and you know, so we need to remember that there's no place for police at Pride because
But it carries on.
yeah, of course. You know, it's an anti-police. Pride started as an anti-police, anti-capitalist movement. You know, and we need to remember our legacy as queer people and how we started and how things brought about, and not just slap rainbow stickers on everything because it's like, oh, inclusion and diversity. But I think it's what we try and do is more important than that. Is it's more about actually listening to people. So people who were in the crowd of like, you know, last year and this year at London Trans Pride, we had over 30,000 people join the protest. And so for us, it felt really important to curate a lineup of 10 or 12 speakers of meeting at all these intersections. So somebody in the crowd can see themselves represented up there and can hear themselves speaking, you know? So it's more than just being a visual thing, but I want that to resonate with everybody and for them to feel included.
That resonates from some other kind of organization. I'm not mentioning it, but it's there's something of what you're saying that I haven't thought about before in your work. That it's more about listening than about dancing, and it's kind of a contradiction, but it's not. Knowing you, it's not. The issue that it's coming emerging from this conversation one was disability. The other one is loneliness. You know, you repeat it many times. I want to listen to what to know. I want to know that people know that they're listening. This is very important because I mean, we have to put it in context again. Tony Blair created this. I think this is my theory. That first Thatcher, of course, created the conditions of neoliberalism, but then Tony Blair came with this cultural paradigm that was the multicultural England, the England of solidarity, the England of inclusion, which actually it's a lie. I mean, what you have is London that is a grinder,
Yeah.
and they put everybody there, and then England. I live in white England. It's a secluded series of ghettos, crossed by the class system that is the harshest thing I ever seen, ever. I mean, it defines a person, it defines his mentality, his or her mentality, and the person has to use their lives to be able to emancipate from that. I think that's the real fallacy here. I mean, the real fallacy is the class system, and but that's why the effect of trying to live a multiculti, as I call it, and a queer life, and I say it as someone that moved to England, in part because I wanted somewhere. London. I mean, London is a toy store for a gay guy, but very soon. Not that soon, but you get tired, but at the same time, you still craving love or craving because the system is selling it to you. Because since Stonewall, there's a model of what being gay should be that has been imposed. What's your relationship with this normalization of gay lifestyle to be accepted?
Yeah, so I think, you know, obviously it's great right now. We have a lot more visibility, a lot more representation. We see ourselves within the media, on TV, and we don't feel as othered. But I think it's a very it's almost like the gay and lesbians that have assimilated to the heteronormative regime of you know, getting a nice job, being very middle class, you know, having a very polite white boyfriend or girlfriend, and being thingy. But I think this is why I always identify as being queer and see Inferno as a queer party, because we do not want to assimilate to that. We are othered, we are different, we are the freaks, we are the weirdos. Yeah, we are the people who don't fit in within that binary system of you know, so whether that is because you look like me, or because you're not middle class, or because you're not white, or, you know, I don't want that job. I don't want to work in an office 9 to 5. That's not who I am as a person, you know. But some people strive towards that because they want to, you know, please their parents, or you know.
What do you think is the place of drugs in all this?
I think because of how society treats queer people, we have a lot of shame. We have a lot of trauma from being raised within this society, and I think drugs offer an escapism. They allow you to disassociate. They allow you to feel euphoria in a way I guess you might have never felt euphoria before, being othered and being alone. And then so when you're with other people and you're taking drugs, it allows you to form some kind of relationship with them, right? It allows you, and also I guess there's just been such a big history of that because of all of these things and how trauma has impacted queer folk.
Very good, very good. I'm really happy you said that, because there's this trend that has to do with this gay assimilationist approach. You know, like we have to have the mortgage, we have to do this, we have to be sober, we have to be. It's fine, yes, but we come from. There's something that is the gay trauma is something very material, and even not acknowledging it is part of the decay trauma. And usually we take it as you do with trauma, with damage. You pass it then to the weak. So that would be my question to you, because I mean, usually the weak one is the effeminate one, is the intersex one, is the one that is associated with things that are more on the edge, and this that I'm talking about it's very material. To give you an example of how the damage in with sexual minorities passes towards the perceived as the weakest. I'm in surrounded by women in my professional life, and they are very open, But when you study queer studies, when you specialize on it, when you start paying attention, you realize the homophobia it's rampant, and it's embedded in the language.
Yeah,
it's embedded in the language. It's like, for example, I invited a friend with her sons to come to my house in Greece, and they said, and she said, oh well, I mean, next year we come also. And I said, no, I didn't invite you next year. I said, don't worry, because you don't have to be celibate. What? That comment is very strong, because that comment, you know what that means? That means because the children are here, a gay person has to not have a sexual life, because we have that reputation of, or the spider that weeps and takes the husbands from the wives.
yeah.
And the other is the paedophilic accusation. So when people talk about like acceptance of homosexuality, they have to look at themselves really closely, because there's a lot of homophobia going on, and in the case of intersex people, and you kind of act up that you turn into a performance. The acting out is the right word, the acting out of the trauma as the figure of the freak.
Yeah, I think that was like just so evident in my early work, because like I'd been made to feel like a freak my whole life, that I was like, this is how you've made me feel, so I'm going to show that to you. That was definitely like my beginning work, was that. And still it runs through my work, because it is a trauma that I carry with me, and although I've done a lot of work on it, a lot of therapy to be able to like live with it, it's still there within me, and it manifests in different ways.
Tell me about the work that you did on yourself. So I wanted to ask you, how did you manage to have the self-confidence to be who you are?
I mean,
I'm fascinated by that.
I didn't. I just all I knew was,
because I started seeing you. I need to tell. I started seeing you. I mean, knowing about you, depressed on a couch.
Yeah.
Like,
I struggled a lot with my mental health as a result of like my upbringing, my shame, and my trauma. So I just made to feel so repulsive and so much of a freak and an outcast from society, and then I kind of stumbled across club culture. Like I was at art school in Newcastle before I moved to London, and I was like just stumbled across like Lee Bowery and all of these like club kids and performers that were working within Nightlife, and that for me, I'd never seen somebody look so extreme and visibly like represent how I felt on the inside, but as a physical manifestation of their form and their body. And I was like so blown away from this, that I was like, I need to go and do this. I need to move to London. I need to be free from any expectations from me here in Newcastle. And I need to move to London and be who I am, figure out who Lewis is. So that allowed me to like dress up so extremely, or turn into like living sculpture or an alien, or honor the like legacy of like queer nightlife and dabble into drag, or all of these wonderful things. So it was about using my body to tell the story of like my queer history, my queer legacy.
But there's something that you say there that that I think that there's something else. There has to be something else, because coming to London, going to London, is also it can sound like the mecca of gay life, but it's also a trap.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a trap of loneliness. It's like the way the kind of the relationships among people are empty, are based. I'm generalizing, but I'm saying tend to be empty because people don't have the time because they have to pay the rent.
Yeah. No, that
So-
is definitely true. Like, it took me a while to find my family, my chosen family in my community, as a result of, like, you know, I moved to London. I had a drug and alcohol addiction as a result of my trauma. I was like in nightlife all the time, out partying, drinking, taking drugs all the time, finding friends. But then I realized that was on such a superficial level. It was like club friends, you know. But also at the same time, I was studying at art school. So I had a really great support network around me at art school. And I've got
I
friends.
didn't know that. What did you study?
I studied with James Taylor.
I didn't. You're from Central St. Martin also.
We studied at London Met. We did our BA at London Met. Yeah.
Alan. Wow. Yeah, didn't know that.
That's how we met each other. We met on the BA course.
So you're like a trained artist. So you okay. So now going to the ICA, it's for you. It's a logical step then.
I guess, but then I also, like, after I left art school, I kind of poured my, you know, I was still dealing with all of my trauma and all my shame, and even though it was getting easier, you know, my art over that 3-year period really became my therapy. You know, it allowed me, before I knew what the word therapy was or what it meant, it was the thing that allowed me to process my trauma and share it with the world in the same way that I guess seeing other performers or some even exhibitions about some traumatic stuff resonates with you, and it helps you both heal. It helps the artist heal, and it helps you heal as a viewer as well. And I think that really resonates with people on a level beyond like a landscape painting, for example, you know. And I think this is
Yeah.
what's so special about performance, you know.
It's so funny that you say the word the landscape painting, because Leo Battista Alberti, he was the first one in the 16th century, 15th, 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 16th, 15th. Well, he said that the way to heal a patient was to put a landscape painting in front of him. So it's the first part. The painting appears, art appears as in the West, appears as therapeutic, you know, as healing, and you talk about that a lot too. You talk about like loneliness. You talk about being heard. You that I think is paramount for any activism in England. I think the level of isolation, and also I wanted to discuss this with you because, I mean, in principle, I disagree with Esteban Munoz and with you about that the dance floor is activism, and then the reasons are because you have to pay a ticket to get in, and so that's
Something we offer at Inferno is like for anybody who's working class or low income, or if you're transgender who's saving for surgery, we give out like 10% of our tickets for free to the community.
Okay. That's important. That's the important part of the activism, because
Yeah,
that's, and because also you have to. It costs money to bring that, to put that together. So this is something that to me is always an issue of concern. I manifested in our discussions in performance studies, because it was becoming a little bit too much about white middle class privilege, you know, and there's other issues that have to do with accessing the club, which is race. You know, if you are the wrong race, of, for example, to your club, to your Inferno parties, that if I show up dressed as I am now, what happens?
you get let in. You get let in. You get to go and enjoy the party. Like, we don't turn anybody away.
I don't turn it. Okay.
I think it's really important for us to create a space that allows anybody to enter it, and until you've done something wrong, you're removed from the space, because everybody should be free to do whatever they want and figure out who they are, right? Because I know so many people who've came to the space as like a cis man or as a straight man, and then being in that space has allowed them to explore their own queerness or their own gender identity. So we don't turn anybody away, because everybody should be able to question at any point in their life. And just because you're not dressed a certain way or look a certain way, it's a space for people to explore their identity safely, free from harassment, free from judgment. So whether you want to try experimenting with gender, if you want to try out, a new area of your sexuality, if you want to be an alien, if you want to be like a living sculpture or a drag queen or a club kid or whatever, we offer that space for you to figure out who you are. And so who you are as a person, what you're attracted to. And we don't turn anybody away based on that, because everybody has the right to discover who they are.
Alexa, turn flowers on.
Okay.
Alexa, raise it to. Raise Alexa, raise it to 100%.
Okay.
How do you deal with anger in the gay world? I'm saying this because one listen to you and one might think that the gay and queer community is this Garden of Eden, where people get along really well, but actually we turn to pass damage against each other and we treat each other like shit. And when the shit hits the fan, you don't help each other. We don't help each other. And that is something for example, in my own activism, I take very much into account. I have the reputation of being like a very mean, critical figure, but actually, when I meet people casually, I try to make the best for to what you just said. I mean, I think there's a shift. I mean, we're getting more conscious of how mean we are to each other.
Yeah, I think society is becoming kinder, right? And I think that's literally what I tried to do with Inferno, because 8 years ago, the landscape of London nightlife was run by white, cis, masculine presenting muscle Marys who are usually middle class, and every party looked the same, it sounded the same, it was the same white DJs on the lineup. So for me, creating Inferno was the kind of like, well, I don't like what's going on now. But there was a lot of bullying, and as a result of that, a lot of meanness and cruelty from these peoples within their minuscule bits of power within queer nightlife, abusing like young people or people who didn't look like them, and it was awful. So that's what really was a catalyst for me to start Inferno, being like, fuck this, fuck all of the things you're doing. Like, this is not an environment I want to be in. Like, I found community. Why isn't there that love and that support there? So that's what I've kind of tried to do with Inferno. And like, I've never claimed to be a utopia. It's just and I've just tried to inject some kindness and a bit of love back into the community.
And how you talk a lot about community, and that's a word that's a tag word here in England since Blair. So if you say the word community, like money can come in your direction. So what does community mean materially, in reality, in this case?
For example, for like one of our Infernos we did a few months ago, one of our Mexican American team members, collective members, was getting deported back to the States because their visa had run out. So we held a community fundraiser, and all the profits from the door went to pay for their visa application.
Right.
We're doing radical acts of this, we're doing, we unfortunately lost a member of our community a few months ago. They went missing. We raised some money towards a ceremonial event for their, like, I guess kind of like a community funeral that their ex-partner curated for them. It was this hybrid art event as a way of like, of all of their old work and stuff, which was a really special thing to be able to do. And yeah, we do things like that. I curate a seminar every year as well as part of Inferno, which is like more about we have some really interesting conversations in the smoking area of nightclubs because they're very political places. But I think it's good to have those conversations in a sober setting in the daytime with like-minded people and allow them to really thrive. And
But don't you find, I love what you're saying, but don't you find that there's danger in those debates? This is something that I struggle with a lot, of sugarcoating too much, or in terms of like, when the topic is this, one ends up trying to be the best of the best. You know what I mean? It's like it's a little bit like I call AA. You know, it's there's because we're dealing with people. We are dealing with people like us that have quite a feeble self-esteem. Whatever we say, whatever how much success we can have, how much things we might do, we come from a place of like they say something to us and it hurts. And no, it's not the same that the father of the family that is like a machine. No, we are like we are a sexual minority still, and that emancipation hasn't happened. And the problem with that kind of debate, not your I'm not talking about your seminars. I'm talking about like the talking about this is to, and this is my object of activism, if you want, is to turn queerness into a laudatory thing in itself. It's like by the sole fact that you're queer, you're already a liberating figure, and this is narcotic. You know, this is like giving a Xanax to someone. It's saying, "Don't worry, as you are, you're amazing." Lady Gaga. No? The idea of the freak is an idea that I could relate a lot visually to your work.
Yeah.
And you bring two things together. Then you bring the turning queerness into something acceptable, celebratable, is it the word, and laudatory. And on the other side, it's a very already commodified notion. So I guess your work is not so much in your visuals, but more in the way you put your visuals in practice, in your relationalities. Is the concept of community, I think, where your work appears, because the freak is the freak. To explain to the people that are listening, the concept of freak. Maybe you are better to explain what's a freak.
So a freak for me, I think, is just anybody who's been othered by society, right? Somebody who doesn't fit into that kind of typical roles, or that binary role of being like, you know, that male or female, like mom and dad, you know, good worker kind of thing. But anybody who's like any alternative, and I think any can be a freak.
It's even worse because it comes, you know, it comes from Hollywood. It comes from America, the concept of freak, and there's a film that is and the freak, and it is related to not only that but also disability, and it puts all things together, and it turns it into something monstrous. It comes from type B kind of cinema, that kind of thing, and then it's appropriated by this culture that appears during the 2000s. That is the culture of the pig.
Yeah.
And the new, and other sexual practices that were considered degenerate, they considered deviant, and they became part of an alternative, I would say, form of activism. What can you say about that?
I mean, I think the freaks are still here. They're still in the underground. They're still part of counterculture, and I think you'll still find them in the nightclubs. They haven't gone away. I think you know, people like Lady Gaga you've mentioned have like appropriated the freak as a form of like more like a fashion, right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
she's
Like
like
Madonna
as a
Bogey.
freak.
Yeah.
You know, it's a performance. It's not real freak. She's dressing as a freak. She's playing a character. She's not really a freak. I mean, she might be. I don't know her personally, but from an outsider perspective, this is what it looks like, right?
Well, when in her songs, she talks about bisexuality. She talks about but that's the limit. You know, she talks about like it's a very heterosexual, bisexual, and it's kind of like appropriation. Madonna started that, or David Bowie, really. It's the appropriation of the look of the other to of the queer to because it became visible. But here we're dealing with other things in reality. And when there's a moment that she talks about the word pig, and at that particular moment, the word pig had to do with a combination of drugs, water sports, whatever, those kind of things that had to do with non-penetration in a reproductive way. You know, so that kind of things, and also have to do with kind of practices that circumvent the dangers of AIDS and contagion, and which in a way become safe. And then with this is what I wanted to talk about to conclude a little bit this conversation, this first conversation. It's very interesting talking to you, Lewis. It's because there's this other activism that has to do with isolation. And I think that I'm very interested in that. During the pandemic, something happened, and something happened to all of us. Something happened. I remember I was following you, and I remember your posts in Instagram were completely disorientated, because they took the community for you is to go to the Athenian Agora and to meet your peers.
Yeah.
They took the Athenian Agora. What do we do? So, but there's been other forms of activism that had been before. For example, barebacking. And this is where it becomes tricky, because I admire a theorist that talks about this, because he was the first one from academia that really seriously said, okay, we're not going to moralize this. We're going to talk about what this means. And he refers to barebacking in the 2005, I think, in San Francisco, which is the moment where the model of the happy gay Chelsea family, you know, like the two blondes, they're on Instagram, the two blondies with muscles, and the two kids even blonder than them, and which mother probably was black, because the mother they put the inseminated into an oven, and the oven is black, not kidding, and in a way, certain communities were reacting to that by creating alternative forms of almost aesthetic forms of reaction. Like, for example, passing the virus as something. This is Tim Dean. Tim Dean is this queer theorist, and he says passing the virus as a gift. They called it a gift. And for example, there's a moment that he's interviewing one of them, and one of them says, well, the virus survives us. Imagine if the virus this guy died from is the same virus that killed Michel Foucault. And so he's creating like an alternative genealogy through death. So this is my question to you, because I mean, in your practice, there's an in-betweenness of something that is very mainstream, Lady Gaga, and something that is not. No, real community and activism, and real activism. You know, not fake activism, real activism, doing that thing of getting money for the passport. Anyway, those kind of things. So in there's there are other forms of activism that have to do with the impossibility of accessing the community and a reaction to passing the gift is like giving the baby. You know, there's a mirroring there. I would say, for example, slamming could be seen, I'm thinking out loud, could be seen as a mirroring of the way the medical corporation has treated homosexuals for almost half a century. So, okay, so homosexuals take the instruments of of medicine and they use it for fun.
Yeah.
So there are two things. If this is a difficult topic, Lewis, I'm sorry, but my question to you, I would summarize the question in terms of like, you're one of the people that I know that I could see blossoming, and I could see blossoming through crisis. One thing is to live as a living dead, working in a corporation or whatever, and another thing, or the mortgage, you know, which is that to me is one of the first signs of living dead. And the other thing is to live through death. And we are two different generations, but we are close descendants from our own Holocaust. The AIDS. It's interesting that there's a vaccine for COVID, but there's no vaccine for AIDS. So it's it has to do with homophobia. Certain practices in the NHS. The NHS is very good at treating the virus, treating your infectology, but it's not very good at treating the psychological effects that creates. So you have to treat, and then it depends on you and your family and your money and certain groups of support that, when you go, are very homophobic too.
Yeah.
Because that's my problem with those groups. I mean, with those groups, what I found is homophobia and racism that they don't even know, they don't even realize.
Yeah.
I always felt like a freak.
Yeah.
So I cannot talk properly. So my question is, how, if you have to give the top tips, the Lewis Burton top tips to living a good life through death and damage and trauma, and avoiding victimization, which is something that you avoid clearly, and what you say to a gay kid, as Pedro Lemebel says, with a broken wing, trying to fly. What would you say?
I mean, first of all, I would say it gets better. I think it's really interesting that you're using this idea of dying, because I feel like I had to kill my old self to be the person I am today, because I had an expectation put on me from society and from my parents to perform and be a certain way that never felt authentic to me or never felt real. So for me, it's about killing off your old self and embracing who you really are and figuring out who that person is, right? So you can honor yourself.
And take good care of yourself, because it's not, it's one of the things that I learned is it's being fashionable to be a victim and to be fragile, but that comes back to you.
Yeah, but I think, you've got to look after yourself and find real community. And I'm not talking about the word community as like, oh yeah, community, people you can profit off. I'm actually talking about real hardcore fucking community that looks out for each other and supports each other. And, the best thing I ever did was getting a fucking therapist,
Yes.
Like therapy is like amazing. I can't recommend it enough to everybody. Everybody's experienced some form of trauma in their life, regardless of what privileged background you come from. Even the rich straight white males have probably experienced some form of trauma. I wouldn't know personally, but
I mean, it's a big deal.
I think we, as people, as human beings, regardless of whether we're transgender or gay or or whatever, you know, like we all want to belong. That's ultimately what we all want, right?
Yeah, but
We all want
when you are heterosexual and you hit all the spots, I mean, it's like that's
society's curated for you, right? You know, you're
exactly.
gonna hit every single spot because society's curated for you. If you're a white, you know, straight person, you
And do you
know.
think that's changing?
I think it slowly is changing. I think there is a lot. I think, you know, through representation and visibility, people are being like, there's alternative ways of living, and also people are. I think seeing firsthand at Inferno, like the Gen Zs, because of social media, are experiencing queerness at a lot younger age, and they're identifying who they are and resonating with people through social media, and therefore there's a new generation of young queer people born without shame or very little shame compared to, I guess, mine and your generations, you know, which I find is so fascinating.
Yeah, oh, I love the youngest, and their brains are amazing because they don't. There are certain things that they don't. I mean, they don't even know what I'm talking about. So,
Yeah.
which is good and bad. But my last question would be, this thing that things are better, and through visibility of people like you, can we say like what freaks, or what otherwise called freaky queers, or this, there's a long history of this, and in Latin America is the effeminate queer, travesti, you know.
Mm.
There's also an increase in the world if we get out of the bubble of London, which is a bubble and a lie. It's a bursting bubble, by the way, and
Yeah.
a lie. If we get out, we see an increase of Christianism, in the form of evangelism. In terms of like Christianism is taking the networks, is taking the technology. They know they have the money. The states, West Africa, Ghana is that was the thing. It's so Brazil, so it's so poor, and so much money is injected into these forms of control that you have an upsurge of Christianism, not necessarily Catholicism, but Christianism, evangelism, that is creating or transforming efforts like yours into a sort of like a backlash because of its visibility. So, do you think that this is something that we're going to regret?
I mean, you know, I think it's interesting because, you know, these evangelicals are aligning themselves with the gender critical movement, which is like the TERFs, the transphobic, the trans exclusionary radical feminists that are very much painting trans women, especially as these idea of the predators, which they were doing with lesbian women 20 years ago, and then black women
What
20
the
years
fuck is
before.
that?
Yeah, but they're aligning themselves with these like far right so-called Christian groups. But I think like anybody who's really a Christian wouldn't be doing these things because you're practicing hate. And I think the most like the Abrahamic religions are all fundamentally about practicing love and kindness and community.
Yeah, but it doesn't work like that. No.
No, of course, and that's the patriarchy, right? That's the patriarchy got a hold of something quite pure and beautiful, and then it's twisted and turned it for its own gain, its own greed, its own power over people, you
Well,
know?
I'm telling you this. You know why? Because I come from Crete. In Crete, I'm not kidding you. I couldn't get out. Get I was coming from here, and so I had this. I was a little flamboyant. Let's put it. I mean, in terms of like jewelry, so like ring, like chain, and something else. The hair, and I had like this kind of like apples, and no pineapples, and it's kind of like yellow shirt. They were pointing at me, and it was one of the first times that I thought there might be a change. There might be a change that we're not noticing, because I would say this year, for example, I cannot go to. I'm not kidding. I'm not. I cannot go to a pub in Hastings. I go to friends because every time I went to a pub, someone said something to me that had to do. This is the way it goes. The woman is attracted to me. She gets drunk. She wants me to, and she said something aggressive. And then, since I don't respond, a man says something aggressive. I had one professional boxing fight. My dad was a boxing world champion. I come from a family. I cannot touch anyone because if I touch anyone, it's like I have the, how do you call it, the banned fist. I cannot, and unless you attack me and I have a witness. So I'm in a very bad position, even to defend myself. That's a material problem. I mean, it's until I realize, okay, well, hold on. Yeah, it's a hair. So I cannot go out with this hair like this. And I had to the same happened to me and I think it has to do with a mix of racism and homophobia. This uneasiness in the
femphobia, right? It's the patriarchy that hates the women or anything femme presenting, you know, or wants to have power over it or control what it looks like or what it should be, right? And if you lean into that femininity in any kind of way, especially as somebody who's maybe assigned male at birth, you are persecuted for rejecting the very thing that controls society. So yeah, I think we've just got to keep pushing against that. And I think we need a matriarchy to come in power, and we need, like, you know, my utopian idea is that we release all of this male energy away and let women take over in this feminine, maybe softer kind of.
No, we're talking about feminine energy because the problem of women is another problem. I mean, because women behave more patriarchally in positions of power. Well, what's the name of the trust?
Liz Truss, yeah, but that's the Tory party. This is like the far right. I'm talking about, like, I mean, because women within patriarchal structures will just emulate the patriarchy, right? But if we like tear down the whole structure and rebuild it up as something else, they won't have to feel that they have to emulate a man's world.
So you're an optimist. You are like what José Esteban Muñoz would have been like so happy with you. Probably you would be in like boyfriends. Imagine that couple. Wow. Luis, I wanted to finish just with you telling us, give us this is an art criticism question. What is the cartography? What is the map of Lewis and his peer? Who do you recognize as your reference and as the people that when the summit of the clubbing or dance floor as emancipation and as activism happens, who are the people you would invite and who you have been inspired by?
Yeah, so I'm like really inspired by a lot of different other community leaders from around London, from around the world, such as, like, you know, there are like collectors like Pussy Palace or New World Disorder and people like Jasmine Infinity. But I'm also really inspired by like my immediate community with Inferno, like some of the performers we have at Inferno, such as like Alexander Dodge Huber, Nicholas Finnegan, Biogal, or some like an incredible radical performance artist. Sweat Mother as well, who's one of the collective members. There's some really amazing artists within my community that just inspire me. Then I get inspired by like all of my trans activist friends who are not necessarily artists, but their work and their passion and their belief in something greater and something better is just so inspiring, and that's what really informs my practice. And then I mentioned earlier on, like, Lee Bowery is a huge influence on my work and was really a big pivotal moment for me. And I think I've even been, like, in an interview, somebody once said if Divine and Lee Bowery had been breeders, I would have been their offspring, which is a fabulous thing. Yeah, I'm going to take that.
Compliment. That is a great compliment. My God.
I know. I'm like, I'm flattered.
Do you see yourself as one of those as a mother? Like in terms of Paris is Burning. I'm not saying Pose because I hated it, but in terms of Paris is Burning, you know, like the mother. I'm talking about like the mother of a house of Burton?
I'm definitely very maternal, and I'm definitely like look after my community, and I have many little children running around London that I've kind of like nurtured and mentored and supported and platformed, you know, because
Yeah.
I see so much of myself in them. I see so much talent in them, and I just want to nurture them and allow them to grow and fully realize who they are, you know, and also share some of the skills I've learned in my adulthood of like how to deal with my trauma, how to deal with my shame, how to better myself, and yeah, just sharing the wisdom that I've learned, the pearls of wisdom I've learned on the way, you know.
I mean, I think we must be talking about your project as a community. It's kind of like taking a step further the notion of house of houses in the clubbing tradition of the 80s. You know, so because there's something of that you described. It's like you take the community cares for the one in trouble, the community. So it's kind of like making that a little bit larger. So, well, I mean, it's amazing what you do, Lewis. So I love you, and yeah, because it's difficult to no. I mean, I don't. People know me. I don't say I love you very easily. I know you very well, and yeah, I know you through a long time, and I heard, and I know, and to see you like this is just so. I'm so happy.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you so much for interviewing me today, and it's been really fascinating, and it's been great seeing you and catching up.
I think we will have to continue this. I mean, you're going to be one of the two. The other interview is Bruce LeBruce, and that already happened. It was completely different than this. Completely different than this one, and it's when my blog turns into English. So so we're going. I'm coming back home with the blog. So welcome, and we're going to carry on our conversation because this is a thing that the queer thing is the issue. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye now.